This conference will now be recorded.
Hi everyone, good morning. Hope you are able to see my screen. So in the last class, right, we have discussed about like what is log, how it looks, and what is Splunk. So basically, Splunk is a software which is used to collect, search, and analyze and visualize the machine generated data. In our case, like it can be like some logs, or it can be something like CPU temperature or anything. Okay, and like what Splunk monitors, basically it will monitor everything in the network. Okay, it can monitor the routers, application servers, as well as the Windows servers, Linux servers, or IoT devices or sensors. So basically Splunk has capability to monitor everything. So it will use something like Splunk apps to integrate with other systems like DB, mainframes. Okay, if it is an Linux or Windows system, it can directly ship the logs by installing the universal forwarder. Okay, so like what are the uses of Splunk? Basically, like we will be investigate as a tester, right? We will be investigating or troubleshooting the issues. Okay, so yeah. So today, right, what we will discuss now, we will discuss about like Splunk components as such, as well as the installation of the Splunk. So Splunk is not only one software. Okay, Splunk has two softwares. One is the client side and one is the server side. So client side is something, okay, that is called as the universal forwarder. So if you want to ship any data from your Linux or Windows machine, okay, we will be installing the universal forwarder in the client side, or it basically it is an agent. Okay, if you install this universal forwarder and if you do some configuration, the logs will be shipped to the Splunk. Okay, so I will just draw one diagram and show you how the components looks like. At the end I will be showing you the installation part as well. So in your company, okay, let's assume there are something like some 50,000 servers. Okay, there are some 50,000 servers of instances like Linux, Windows, and all those. Okay, if I have only one server, okay, there is one Splunk server. Okay, this is my Splunk server. In Splunk, there are multiple components. One of the component is called as an indexer. So here, this is my application one. Basically, what we will do, right? Here, we will be configuring the universal forwarder. It can be also called as the UF. Notation can be the UF. After installing the universal forwarder in your application or in your server, what you will do, right? What logs are required, that you will be mentioning in the universal forwarder configuration file, such that it will pick that configuration. Based on the configuration, it will pick the corresponding file and it will send to the Splunk. Okay, so if let's assume in your application server there will be different types of logs. Some are related to OS. Okay, some are related to applications. Okay, these applications, let's assume these are the custom logs. This can be generated in different paths. Let's assume if you have defined your own application, okay, and if you have defined your own path, okay, what you will do, right, you will be mentioning that configuration in the universal forwarder in one file called inputs.conf. So whenever the Splunk universal forwarder restarts, okay, it will read these inputs.conf. Based on the configuration, it will be shipping the data to the Splunk indexer. Okay, so Splunk indexer's job is to store the data. Now here I am sending the logs from only one machine. Let's assume my organization is 750K applications. Okay, and there are some like 100 projects or 200 projects. Each and application, sorry, each and project will have different applications. The applications can be Tomcat, Ripspear, or some other. Okay, basically how the Splunk, like in a database, you will, sorry, in a database server, you will be having database, right? Here you will be having something like an index. Index is equal to something like Tomcat, Tomcat, or the index name can be anything. Okay, so what, basically in an index there will be something like an index indexer, which it will store the logs. Okay, I can have something like, I can have something like a project one or something. Basically the data, it is a grouping of, like, let's assume you are have if you are having a application with some cluster, means the same Tomcat, it is forming as a some cluster. Okay, there are some 10 servers. All, if you want to troubleshoot an issue, right, we have to check the 10 servers. Instead of that, right, what we can do, right, we will be shipping all these logs to the one index. Okay, and the data gets stored in something like buckets. Okay, here this is called as a bucket, basically. Okay, the data gets stored in the bucket. How we will call it as a database, no? How the in SQL you will be having database, right? In the same way, the data is stored in something like a bucket, and the bucket data can be like referenced by using the index. Okay, let's assume now the data is getting ingested into the Splunk. Okay, now if I'm like the data, let's assume like each application is sending something like 1 MB or like 5 MB per minute. Okay, and I am having some 50K applications. 50K servers are there. So now how much data I would be getting? 50K into, it is something like 2.5 lakh MB per minute, right? Into the server. Yes or no? 5 MB into some 50K. So it is something like 2.5K MB per minute. The data is being pulled from the Splunk like clients to the Splunk server. So what we will do, right? This server won't have that much capability. I mean to say, right, Splunk Indexer has two jobs then. First job is like getting the data. If a user requests the data, right, it has to get the data. Okay. So then there will be a high IO that will be happening. This Splunk Indexer machine will be hot. Agree? If it is getting some 25 lakh MB per data, okay, so 2.5 lakh MB per data, and if I do a search operation on it, right, it will be like, it will consume a lot of resources. So what we will do, right, we will be using some other component called as search head. So search head's job is to get, whenever you give some timings, like I want the data from yesterday, today, or if you are running some test, you will be mentioning the timings, like I need the data of 1.5 hour of my test duration. When, okay, whenever you search and do a click, right, the search head will get the data from the indexer and it will display for you. Okay, now if you are doing any filtering, that those operations will be done on the search head. Clear? If you are working, if you are a developer or a tester, right, you will be given the search head access. Okay, you will be logging to the search head and you will be like searching the logs. Okay, and let's assume here you are having only one indexer. If it goes down, then the complete Splunk infrastructure will be getting affected, right? So what they will do, right? They will form as a cluster. So you will be having something like this is Splunk Indexer 1. Likewise, you will be having Indexer 2. Indexer 3. Like that, this also will form as a cluster. Let's assume. So what happens, right? Whenever you send the data from universal forwarder to your Splunk indexer, right? You will be using some load balancer configuration. Means the data will get parallelly ingested into the multiple servers. Clear till now? Any doubts?
Yeah, Vibhu, what is search head? It is an endpoint or it is again we need to
It's an end.
install it
It is a
like
separate
if
separate
develop.
server. It's a separate server basically. So
Okay.
all these are select. So
Okay.
this is a separate server which will have Splunk software. Okay.
Okay.
Indexer is also a separate server which will have Splunk software. So all these beauty of the Splunk is like they will provide only two softwares. One is the client side, okay, and another is the server side. So based on the configuration, we can convert the Splunk software to an indexer or a search head or other components. Clear?
Yes, Vibhu.
So now, if you want to access Splunk, okay, the port will be something like 8000. Okay. The web port, let's assume if you have installed Splunk, okay, if you want to access the UI part, okay, you have to give something like a colon, look, Splunk or the URL colon or the IP address colon 8000, okay, and there will be one more thing, right? There will be one more thing like management port. Okay, I will come to that management port later. First, we'll complete these components. So these are the indexers. So I can have like multiple indexers. If I am having some multiple index rights, there should be one leader or a master who will manage that network, no? That cluster. In any cluster, if you have seen, there will be one fellow who will be managing the cluster. That guy is called as a cluster master. Let's say he will manage the cluster. Okay, I can make this node as a cluster master. Okay, if I'm having some 10 10 nodes, okay, if I'm having some 10 instances, there will be one cluster master who will be doing the job. Like, let's assume I'm getting the data here, in which indexer I have to store the data, okay, which that will be decided by the cluster master. He won't directly take the data, but it will guide the other indexers to help in the ingestion process. Okay, now I want to, like, I told you, no, here I will be having something like 50K servers. Now I want in that 50K there are something like 10K servers. Okay, in that I want to like append some configuration. I want to some amend. Let's assume like Tomcat or some guy, they have changed the log file path or they have introduced a new log. So what I have to do, I have to make the changes in every server. Okay, if I want to do that in at one go, right, there will be one server called as a deployment server. Okay, this deployment server, what it will do, right, it will deploy the like changes. Like if you want in inputs.conf, let's assume you are fetching something like slash the log files of application 1 slash log 1. Okay, after few months, right, the developers has introduced something like application slash, okay, okay, something like that they have introduced. Now my job is to ingest this also. My job is to collect this also. So if I want to do it in all these servers, right, I can, what I can make use of is the deployment server. Using the deployment server, I can do that configuration in all the servers at one go. Clear? Basically, this is used to make any changes to the configurations, or if you want to install apps, that can be done using the deployment server, because there are chances like you will be having 50k or 100, sorry, 1 lakh servers also in an organization. It is not easy for an admin to log in these servers and do that configuration, right? That's why you will be having the deployment server. So we have discussed about like, yeah, heavy forwarder. Yeah. So let's assume, I think like you know like how Splunk charges. So the Splunk charges based on the data you ingest. It is not something like the number of clients. Okay, based on the data you ingest. Let's assume if you are sending some 10 GB data, you will be having, you will be charged for 10 GB. Okay, if you are charging like if you are sending like 1 TB data, you will be charged for 10 TB data. But it is not based on the number of clients or the number of from nodes which you are sending. If you are purchasing some 50 GB, sorry, 500 GB license, you can send data from one server or thousands or 10,000 servers. They don't bother. So they will bother only, the license will be done based on the number of nodes. Sorry, number of how much the data. If you are purchasing something like 10 GB data, so the like it will store the 10 GB. Okay, it is not based on the number of clients. Let's assume you are dumping a lot of data. Okay, like in your, let's assume you have seen many occurrences where there the data written to the file will be more, out of which we may require only some content. Let's assume for a one transaction, okay, there are some 100 lines logged, but we are bothered about only 5 lines. Okay, let's assume I will give an example like MasterCard is there. Okay, now you are doing a payment for a MasterCard, okay, for which they are bothered about the transaction ID, okay, amount, to and fro, credit card, some details, okay, not credit card details, but that reference ID or something, and the amount. Out of 200 lines, okay, that content will be displayed only on about like 3 lines. So there is one component called as a heavy forwarder. So what this heavy forwarder will do, right? It will parse the log. Let's assume I don't want to send errors to my Splunk. I can filter using the heavy forwarder. Okay, let's assume I want to parse the data using universal forwarder, right? It is just whatever the data that gets populated in your Splunk log that will be directly sent to the indexer. Whereas there is one component called heavy forwarder where you can just ignore, like if you want to filter the content. Okay, let's assume I'm having some 100 lines, out of which I have to send only 10 lines for every transaction. Then I can send only those and I will be charged only for those 5 lines. Okay, else let's assume from my client, okay, I'm sending from 1 GB, okay, 1 GB data, okay, out of which my client's requirement is to enter only the passed transactions and the failed transactions with the transaction ID. And transaction ID as well as the some account details or whatever. Okay, some data. So using this heavy forwarder, no, what I can do, right? I can parse the data. So and I can send only the data that are required. In other case, if my customer is asking to send only the passed transactions, ignore the failed transactions, I can filter using the heavy forwarder. The difference between the universal forwarder and heavy forwarder is like it won't do any parsing. Universal forwarder won't do any parsing, whereas heavy forwarder will do the parsing. Clear till now?
So
Hello?
Webu heavy forwarder is something we need to install it separately, or it will be
Yes,
a part of
everything
the.
is a separate. Yeah, everything is a separate thing. Actually, in Splunk, there are like multiple deployments. Okay, if you are installing your Splunk in your desktop, right, you will be getting
Mhm.
okay indexer plus search head. Okay, the indexer and search head will be there by default. Okay, means one thing if I want to say in simple, right, whenever you install a standalone in this one, right, standalone Splunk, you will be given the indexer. Okay, indexer will have search head capability also. Okay, indexer will have UI also, but in real time now we want to use search head, sorry, indexer for UI. You will be using another instance for search head in your environments, office environments, but in your laptops, whenever you install this indexer, right, it will be having the search head capability also. Clear?
Yes. Okay.
So if I put something like this, right, it will be the user will click on the load balancer URL. Okay, if you are getting sending some request, okay, and that will be 1 second. I will take one pointer. Okay, yeah, you will be hitting some like load balancer URL. Okay, and as I mentioned, you will be targeting the search hit whenever you give your query, like you want error or you want some transactions with success. Okay, you will be mentioning that in the search hit, and whenever you click the time window, filter the time window and click, right, it will go to the indexer and it will fetch the data for you. Okay, and okay, and here there is something like a universal forwarder which will be sending the data to the Splunk Indexer. Okay, this is the universal forwarder. Okay, it will be sending the data to the Splunk Indexer. So if you want to filter the data, okay, if you want to filter the data, then you will be sending that request to the heavy forwarder, and this heavy forwarder will send that data to the indexer. Okay, and there will be one deployment server which will be managing these clients. If you want to install any apps or any configuration into these universal forwarders, right, or heavy forwarders or anything, you can make use of the deployment server. It can do some configuration in the indexers and the search hits as well. Okay, and I missed one component that is called as a license server. I will explain like what is license server. Now you are sending some data. Okay, so there should be one person who should control the, like if you are purchasing some 10 GB license, okay, that should be validated, right, whether you are breaching the 10 GB or not. That will be managed by the license server. Okay, so license server will put a keep a tab on like how much data is coming into the Splunk and how much is left, and those things will be managed by the license master. Okay, and two more important things. Only two things you need to remember. Okay, in Splunk, there will be one port called 8089. This is called as the management port. So in order to check the health status or anything of any component, right, Splunk will use the port called 8089. Okay, 8089 is the management port for every component. If the Splunk wants to talk to other node, okay, like if this cluster master needs to talk to indexer or indexer needs to talk to search head, okay, it will use 8089 port. And there is something like a port 9777, 9777. Okay, you know S, you know SSH, right? You all know SSH port, right? What is the port number of SSH? Hello, what is the
I
port
will
number?
be, yes,
Port
Vibhu,
number of,
I use the SSH but don't remember the port number.
yeah, the port number is 22. So basically every service will have one port, either it is FTP or SSH or HTTP. Okay, every service whatever runs on a system will have some port called which will use for the communication. So let's assume if I want to send, because if you want to configure the universal forward, right, you need to remember basically every this indexer will listen on 9777 port. Means whenever you are sending the data from universal forwarder to Splunk, okay, that should be pointed to 9777. So let's assume you are doing some configuration for your lab. Okay, normally you have to give the destination, right? In your universal forwarder you have to point the destination where the data should flow. We have to give something like 192. Let's assume the indexer IP is 192.168.1.100. Okay, we have to give the port number as well. Okay, so whatever the data that comes from the universal forwarder will be sent to only the 9777 port in the indexer. This is one which you need to remember. Two ports you need to remember. One is like 9777 where the indexer will receive the traffic, and one is the 8000 port which is for the web UI. For a performance tester that is more than enough. So you 8089 no one will ask us, but it is good to know. Clear? Any doubts till now?
No, Vibhu, we are good.
Yeah. So now, right, we have some time. Okay. I showed now like how to create one account. If you want to sign up, right, you have to just click on sign up. Okay. You have to provide your details, okay, and create a click sign in and create an account. Post that, right, if you want to get SaaS application, right, which is valid for 15 days, you can click on free Splunk. So you will be getting one mail with a SaaS account. Okay, else, right, you can download and install. Okay, yeah, you can do that as well. For our classes, right, we will be installing.
And Vibhu, by uninstalling it, can we use it multiple times?
Yes. You can use it a number of times. So like yesterday someone were asking, right, what are the capabilities of Splunk? I mean, like whether it supports SaaS as well as the enterprise edition or like local system. Okay, you will be using the enterprise edition. Okay, and using this enterprise edition, right, you can ship around like 500 MB of data per day to an indexer. Okay, and you will be there is one more thing called like a cloud instance. Okay, other than that, right, the Splunk has other products like Splunk data streamer. So what it will stream processor, it will directly analyze the data in the real time manner. Okay, in milliseconds, basically within milliseconds it will process the data. And there is one more component called, in security, the Splunk is widely used. Okay, it is the top two tool in security. So there will be SCIM will be there. There will be calling like Splunk SIEM. Have you heard about Splunk SIEM? Enterprise is SIEM. This is also one of the enterprise something security manager. I'm not going into that one. Basically, like Splunk is used in the security, and you will be doing the behavior analytics, okay, threat analysis, and IT operations also they will be using. And I'm not going much into that one. Okay, this one is the deployment model. Sorry, but if you want to learn a Splunk, if you are having interest in security, right, you can go with the Splunk SIEM. That is also a very good tool. So just a recap. So there are three components which are like forwarders, indexers, and search heads, which will really do the processing for you. Okay, actually, these are the processing components. Splunk has multiple components. Just now we saw in this, right? Out of which forwarders like universal heavy forwarder as well as the indexer, okay, and search heads, these are having the processing capability. Okay, and in your organization it will be something like this. If your organization having some less than 100 users, right, you can have one search head, you will be having some 2 or 3 indexers, and you can have some like 100 to 200 forwarders in for a small scale company. Okay, and uh, like uh, one second, these are the deployments models. Okay, if your company is something like a medium based, right, you can have something like this. You can have multiple search heads, okay, like one search head and multiple nodes, indexer nodes. Peer nodes are called as indexer nodes. Okay, and you can have multiple universal forwarders. Universal forwarders will send the data to more than two indexers over here. Okay, and there is something like search head cluster. Search head cluster is somewhere you will be having the multiple search heads. Till now you are having only one search head, no? Here you will be having multiple search heads in the which are connected to the indexers. Search feeds are nothing but indexers. Let's assume for the first request when you do, right, that request may go to this search head, whereas after 2 minutes if you like do one more operation, right, it may go to the other search head. Basically it will be doing the load balancing over here. In an organization, right, in a big organization, you will be having some infrastructure like this. Okay, now we will cover the licensing, I mean like cost part, and we'll go for the installation. Okay. Actually this info I'm not covering much. Okay, I'll ping the because I don't think like for a performance test it is required, but if you know the architecture, that should be fine. That's why I'm explaining this one fast. Okay, in our detailed classes, if you want, I can explain, not an issue. So how the Splunk calculates the cost, right? It is based on the GB of data. Let's assume I am consuming 10 GB per day. Okay, the licensing will be based on something like enterprise security. For enterprise security, there will be like separate charge. Okay, IT surveillance is there, ITS, IS something they will say, ITIS. Okay, for that what they will do, right, in security, they will, if an organization it is having some 1 lakh servers or your desktops or anything, okay, let's assume if they want to monitor for the potential threats, right, Splunk has inbuilt apps which will does that purpose. Basically those apps will detect for any possible hacks or like any threats. Okay, so if I select this enterprise security, right, there will be three types of licenses. Okay, one is like cloud license, out of which the infrastructure will be hosted and managed by the Splunk itself. And there is something like a term license. Term license is something like you have the hardware will be yours in your company, and you have to ship your logs to Splunk. Got it? There is something like a perpetual license, which I am not much sure, but on a high level, right, you will be charged two ways. One is for the license as well as for the support. Got it? Normally support will be there, right? For support also, Splunk will be the charges will be included in the term license. The term can be 1 year or 5 years or whatever. Okay, clear? Why Splunk is more popular, right? Let's assume why, like there are other tools also, competitors of Splunk, but why is Splunk more popular is, let's assume if I am sending some 10 GB data from this application server into this indexer. Okay, ultimately whenever the data gets stored into the Splunk, right, it will be reduced to, it will be compressed to some 3 GB. Mostly if you are pumping some 100 GB data, the compression rate will be from 50 to 70, but based on the log. If it is only log files, right, it will do it will do some by using this algorithms, right, it will compress the data to 30 GB. This is the beautiful feature through which the like size of the data that is getting into the stored into the disk will be getting reduced, and the infrastructure also won't grow very big. Clear? Let's assume if you are sending some 1000 GB data from all your, sorry, 100 GB data from your all your clients, when it comes and it gets stored in the uh, indexer, now it will become only 30 GB. That's why the Splunk is more popular, because if per day if you want to store 100 GB, right, then you have to increase your indexers, right, and you have to increase the disks. But this is a beautiful feature which will compress the data. Clear? Any doubts?
Oh,
So now we will see Splunk installation on Windows. So this if you want to install Splunk, right, you can go and install some indexer. Like there is, by default you will be getting the indexer. Okay, Splunk. Splunk will like give you two types of softwares. Yesterday I told you, no, it is the enterprise software and other is the universal forwarder. Okay, so I will go and open another tab. So this is the universal forwarder. Mostly, right, universal forwarder. If you see, right, the it is some 70 MB to 80 MB or 60 MB, whereas in Linux it will be very small. Okay, 30 to 40 MB. Normally, like 90% or 95% of our servers will be on Linux, so it is just a 30 MB file, and we will try to 1 second. Okay. Okay, this is the enterprise. Today I will be installing the Splunk in Windows. Tomorrow I will be installing on the Linux. Okay, so I can go with a zip or MSI setup file. I will go with the setup file installation. Okay, the Splunk is being downloaded. After 60 days, right, what you can do, right, you can uninstall and install. That's it. After the 60 days, what you can do, right, you just, if you want to reinstall the Splunk, just uninstall and install. That should be fine. Okay, here, right, I have to check the, like, I have to accept the license. Okay, now I can click on next. So this is the page where you will provide the username and password for the web console. Okay, you have to, once you install the software, you have to log into the web UI, right? So what you have to do, right, you have to give the, during the credential, like during the installation itself, it will ask you to create the user. It is the web username and password which I have created, and I can click on next. Okay, it is asking me to create a shortcut menu. Installation in Windows is pretty straightforward. Standalone installation will be very simple. Okay, if it is like if you are deploying some clusters like Indexer and all those, that will be tough. But standalone installation will be very easy. Just next. Maybe in Linux you have to remember some commands to stop, start, and servers, but in Windows, like, it should be fine. Everyone in the class are from performance testing and testing, right? No one is from networking or like administration, no? Hello? Everyone from testing and development only, no one from infra or IT? I think everyone are from testing and development. Because the scope changes for Splunk, no, the scope changes for based on your role. If you are a developer and tester, just this should be fine, whatever we are doing. But if you are an administrator, no, then you can easily switch roles from your infra to Splunk admin. Basically, Splunk also provides some career opportunities, and it is being used by a number of companies, thousands of companies. Just now I have shown you, right? You are not here. 1 second. Now they are charging for, if you are consuming some 10 GB data, they are charging around like 80,000. 5-year cost, yearly cost is $8,000. If you go to Elasticsearch, right?
Elasticsearch is very not that pricey, right?
Pardon? Yeah, it will. Elasticsearch will be clumsy. So see, they are charging $19 per month. You see the price difference between the competitor and the Splunk. The Elastic instance cloud is offering something like $19 per month, or if you see $30 per month enterprise itself. Whereas if you see the Splunk, approximately they are charging $8,000. So that is the capability of Splunk. Actually, it is like proven, and so even if you take like enterprise, it is just as low as like $30. Whereas Splunk is like around like $8,000.
But Elastic is picking up nowadays, right? I mean, it's picking up. I've seen that. It's
Can you come
improving,
again? Your
and
voice.
Elasticsearch is picking up now. I mean,
Yes,
because
yes,
of
it
its
is picking
price.
up now. Yeah, it's picking up. Actually, I worked some 5 to 7 years back on Elasticsearch, where it was like a nightmare. So we don't know when it will go down. Basically, if the node goes down for 1 minute, right, you will be losing lot of data.
Okay.
So for a compliance, like if it is like HIPAA or something, right? If a customer asks you, if a financial institution is there, one example I'm telling. Meanwhile, this installation is happening. Let's
Mhm.
assume there is some requirement for you, like you have to store the logs for last 10 years. Okay. Let's assume out of which 1 minute data, there will, let's assume there is some tolerance that is per 30 minutes or something per day. If it breaches, right, then you have to pay heavy fine. Yes or no? If you are not meeting that
Yeah, true,
standard.
true. Yeah, yeah. You have to
So
have the compliance.
yeah, even in, if you take AppDynamics, if you are running one test, okay, if it goes for 15 minutes in your 10 hours window, will you able to do something? Will you able to like monitor, or if you will you conclude that result? No, right? In the same way, for an organization to meet that compliance, right, they should, the data there should not be any data loss. Okay, that can be achievable by Splunk in that complex architecture. Now they will make sure like the data won't go. If some one node goes down or two nodes goes down in their infrastructure, they will be maintaining the high availability, and they will make sure like the data won't go out. Okay, so the installation is pretty straightforward. Okay,
So it's load
just
balanced also, you're saying, right? Splunk is load balanced.
it can be load balanced. The indexers, if you are having some 10 indexers, okay, if the source is sending the data of 1 GB, what it will happen, right, it will be splitted into like some fractions like 100 MB per indexer. Okay,
Hmm.
and
Okay.
inside that the replication will happen.
Okay. So the replication also will be there. So one thing dies, another replication is ready.
Yes, there will be something like replication factor and all those that comes in administrator, means how many like copies of data you need to store. Okay, that will be too technical for us. How many searchable copies and replication copies?
That the
RF and
administrator will take care, right?
yeah. You will no need to bother with that.
Yeah, but it takes the system slow, right? The more you have all this,
Which one?
the more
It is a
more
40
number
MB
of,
file.
yeah,
One
okay,
second. One second. One second.
no problem.
Oh my God. Did I lose password? Yeah. Okay. So for your information, the server side it will be like 100 MB or something. Sorry, 800 MB or something. Splunk software on the server side. Whereas on the client side for Linux it is 30 MB only. Got it?
So client side means the where your application is running. That's client side,
Client
right?
side is something like your application server. Client is something
Where
which
it's
sends the
capturing
data.
the performance. Okay.
Yeah. If you are doing your performance testing on a Tomcat server, that would be your client. The client for a, I'm talking with respect to like Splunk as a server. The
Yeah.
data which comes, from which the Splunk receives is a client for the Splunk server.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So first thing, right? This is the Splunk UI. Okay. Now, if I click on settings, right, you will be having something like indexes. I told you, no, Splunk will be storing the data in the indexes. Okay. Even there will be something like an internal index. Okay. In internal index, what will happen, right? The Splunk itself will have generate some logs, right? Splunk is also a software. It can generate its own logs. Okay. These are the internal indexes. The indexes that comes with Splunk by default. Those are the internal indexes. Okay. Default indexes. Okay, if you want to create a new index, right, you have to click on new index and you have to like uh, send the data from your application servers to this particular index. By default, right, this is the there will be something like 11 indexes. Okay, in your company you won't have all this, as this is the admin server, right? I mean, like, this is the enterprise edition, you will be getting these many options. Okay, basically whatever that are present in knowledge you will be getting in your company. This system is used for managing the Splunk. Let's assume, like, if you want to like restart the Splunk, okay, I can go to something like server controls and I can restart the Splunk. Okay, these are related to system. Okay, and these are for like configuring the clients. If you want to do any configuration from like if you want to make this Splunk to be a universal forwarder or heavy forwarder, not a universal forwarder, heavy forwarder or something, right? You have to go with this one. If you want to ingest data, right, you can use like data inputs and you will be sending the data. And we just now told, right, I just now explained, like there will be something like a clustering and all those, for which there will be some configuration for this. And like you can create multiple users and tokens using this one. Basically in office you will be getting only this one. Okay, and there will be one more thing called like a Splunk monitoring console, where it will be displaying the health stats of the Splunk, like what is the license usage, what is the disk usage, okay, what is the indexing rate, and how many searches are happening, concurrent searches, and what is the CPU memory. This will be any, if there are any alerts, triggers and all those, right, that will be mentioned in this console. Okay, tomorrow, right, what we will do, right, we'll go to data inputs and we'll load some data. Okay, and we'll see like how Splunk parses the data. Okay, I will just add the data and I will, okay, tomorrow we'll do that activity. So actually, whenever in a log file, no, 1 second, I will share my screen. Yeah, if you see this access log, right, whenever you send this log to Splunk, what will happen, how the fields are recognized. Okay, if you are telling some 200, it is a HTTP status code. Whether you want to really create some field like status or there is something like here JSession ID is there, how the Splunk recognizes and all those, how the Splunk does the parsing, no, that I will explain tomorrow. Actually this
So
will also, this
Splunk
is
is,
also one term. Yeah, tell me.
yeah, yeah. Splunk is also used to monitor and even debug, right? When something breaks down, you can use Splunk
Yes,
also like AppDynamics. Got it.
those actually Splunk is the main source of debugging, no? For performance point of view, if something goes wrong, then only we'll use AppDynamics. Okay, for every event, like any, if there is any like what to say, any failure or something, that will be recorded in the log. If there is any transaction failure, that won't get recorded in your AppDynamics. That will be recorded in the log. If there are some 100 components, out of which some 10 or 15 components are failing intermittently, then that event will be recorded in the Splunk, sorry, logs, no? The same logs will be shipped to Splunk.
So do you need both AppDynamics and Splunk, or one
Yes.
of them is enough?
No,
You
no.
need both, right? You need both.
Everything has one purpose. Okay. In your organization, as I mentioned, if it's a if it's a financial institution or Splunk, okay, now you know, right? Some of the infrastructure is present in cloud, some of the infrastructure is present in on-premises. When you are designing a solution, you might have also seen, right, where your app servers will be present in cloud, but your DB servers will be present in your on-premises. But if you
Yeah.
want a transaction to succeed, okay, you have to go to cloud, and it has to come to on premises where your DB will be there, but it won't directly interact with the DB. There will be one application which will be taking that request and convert it into a JDBC connection, and it will doing. So if there is any failure, okay, it is hard to analyze all this. Like you can't analyze like if you take AWS, right? AWS has some different types of log mechanism solution. Okay, like Azure has some different type of solution, right? So like Splunk is a universal solution where you can send on premises as well as the cloud logs to the Splunk. So there is something like it can send in a secure way by encrypting or something using their algorithms. So it won't be that like if I'm shipping the logs from Splunk universe using this universal forwarder, it is meant to like it will be doing applying some certificate and it will be installing. It won't be like sent like a text. Okay, so it is at one place you can monitor the your application logs in AWS, or if there is any lambda in AWS. Okay, those also can be integrated. AppDynamics is only like useful for like CPU memory and all those. You won't in your in your testing
Metrics, the
environment.
metrics. Okay.
Yeah, in your testing environment, performance testing environment, where you will be enabling much of probing. Whereas if you go to production, right, you won't enable this much probing. What you do in your performance testing environment, where there you will enable only minimum things like CPU memory, and you won't do take multiple samples also. Likewise we did in your performance testing, because it will apply a overhead on the system. Splunk is just an agent which will push. It is 30 MB file. It won't cause any performance degrade. But in earlier versions, right, in like when the Splunk is released, they used to have only one server. Like now we are having some 500 MB of the Splunk, right? The same was used to ship the logs. During that time, right, the customers raised multiple constraints like their performance is getting degraded if they use this universal forwarder, like that Splunk Enterprise as a universal forwarder. So they bundled a separate package for universal forwarder. Did I answer your question?
Yeah,
It won't put any overhead. Even AppDynamics also put overhead on the system, but there will be some threshold that will be defined. Every application we onboard, right? That's why we won't. If you take any DB server, right, you won't install heavy forwarder or universal forwarder in the DB server. So we'll use some apps and we'll try to get the data from that. In router, you
okay.
can't do. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
sure. Thank you.
I'm stopping the recording.